So I was wondering why they picked me to speak here tonight. And then I realized that I have a wealth of experience to share with you. I have so many screw-ups. I still have a hard time saying the other word in public, but you'll forgive me. I have so many screw-ups in my career that goes back more years than I would like to admit, that I have a rich experience I'd like to share. And it starts all the way back in something called Hebrew school. Now, most of you guys are dovrei vrit, so, ein lechem nisayon shel Hebrew school. That is a strange form of torture that diaspora Jews force their kids to do. They sit them in Hebrew school. You hate it. And I really hated it so bad that I was expelled from Hebrew school. Now, you have to be really bad because they need your money, right? They need the numbers, but to expel you, you have to really be bad. And I was bad. I won't tell you exactly what I did, but it was very nasty. And ultimately, it forced my family to have to leave the synagogue. But my revenge is, guess what, guys? I'm here. I'm speaking in Yerushalayim, and I'm a Hebrew school expellee. Now, I then went on to high school to be a high school radical, and I was the president of my high school. And I hated the administration so much because they wouldn't let us do anything fun that I went ahead and I led a campaign to cancel student government. I said, since the memshela of the studentim hu bli hashpa'ah, bo nevatel oto kulo. So we actually succeeded. It was written up in all the newspapers on TV that this high school voted to get rid of student government, and I felt this was a great success. But what I failed to realize was that 3 weeks later, when I left campus, because I was going on to Berkeley to be a real radical, and Ms. Mino at the Studentim HaChadashim said, you guys want a student government? They said, yeah. And they put it right back in. So that was a failure mode of not thinking clearly, right? Spending a lot of time to do something and not realizing that kacha, it goes away. Another failure mode from my college experience was I liked college a lot, but I was too busy doing all kinds of other things, in particular tzionut. And I was actually an itinerant organizer. I had an old car and I used to drive around Western United States campuses with ta'amula and a 16-millimeter projector. And I was constantly leaving school, and it got so bad that after 8 years and having taken 3 years off of school, that I said, F it, I'm not going to finish. I don't need a degree. Who needs a degree? I'm going to Israel to make aliyah. And I had 2 what are called incompletes, lo mushlam, which I went with me, and then I started my career, and I was successful. And every time you do a public offering or an acquisition, they ask you for your korot chaim. Now, I didn't lie. I didn't want to lie, so I told people I studied at Berkeley. I never finished, and it was an embarrassment. It really, my whole life, lo ayali degree. I mean, I got straight A's in all my classes, but I never finished college. And fast forward now 30 years later to 2010, and I'm taking my company public, at that time Vringo, on Wall Street. It was called the most improbable IPO of all time. We can talk about that later. And what you have to do today is you have to get a fact-checking group to check your facts. And I got that call. I was the CEO of the company from the fact checkers who said, you got a problem with somebody's bio. And I said, oh crap, who's lying? And they said, you are. I said, what do you mean you're lying? I'm not lying. I don't have a degree. Because I knew they were focused on my degree. They said, sir, why didn't you mention you have a degree from the University of California? I said, I have no degree. They said, sir, you have a degree, call your college. So I call the college up. And they say, back in 1980, you were graduated Phi Beta Kappa summa cum laude. I went my whole life thinking I didn't have a degree. Now, if that's not an F-up of grand proportions, okay, but actually it was really positive for me because it saved me from the disaster of graduate school, okay, and all kinds of other things, and I proved that you can do stuff without the degree. I made Aliyah, I was hanging out. My father came to check me out here in this country. And he took me to visit some guys at Raphael. My father was a Yazam Sidrati. I'm probably actually third generation because his father was a bootlegger. So I think that's a kind of Yazamut. That means a guy who makes alcohol illegally back in the Prohibition. And I still like alcohol very much. But in any event, I was with my dad, and I was with these guys where he was talking about fiber optics. And these guys up at Raphael look at me and say, Medved Jr., what are you doing here in Israel? And I said, I hang out, the old city. You know, I basically do a little informal guiding, and maybe I'll study and get my degree sometime. I don't know. And this one guy turned to me in Hebrew, so my father wouldn't hear and be embarrassed. And he said, Bizbuz totali. Okay, like total waste. I felt like my life was a waste. I felt like I was slapped. Instead of him dancing hora with me and saying, hey, welcome home, brother, he's telling me my life is a waste. And I said, Mapitom. I wanted to say WTF, but I said, Mapitom. And he says to me, look, you know, like you, we got lots of guys. Like your dad and things like fiber optics, we need that big time. So on the way home, I basically got my first technology job, which was to work with my dad, my late father. By the way, his doctor, Dina Ben Yehuda, is here tonight. You're going to hear from her. She kept my father alive for 14 years. I don't know what she's going to talk about in terms of failures, but I can tell you this woman is a saint and is an extraordinary doctor. Okay, and thank you for everything you do. Speaking of my father, I learned a lot of lessons at my company with him. Number one is we once had this really hard project to build a free space optical communication system, which means fiber optics but no fiber. And the air is really not a warm environment to send optical communications. So we tried and we tried and we tried. It was a big contract. We needed the money to keep this company startup alive. And it simply didn't meet spec. It was out of spec. And I kept on saying to my dad, we can't ship it. It's out of spec. And my dad finally looked at me and just stamped and he goes, damn it, we're shipping it. We're shipping it. And I looked and I said, okay, you know what? These guys aren't going to accept it. We're not going to be paid. The company's going to get lost. And then a week later, I called the company to see what they thought of the product. And they said, what product? And I said, the product we shipped you. He goes, we never got it. Turns out Federal Express lost it. The insurance paid for it. We got our money, and we never had to do it again. Okay, so sometimes you just ship it, okay, with or without the spec. Now, I had, over the course of my career, maybe 200 investments I've invested in, okay, or started. I've done about 100 now at our crowd, which is the last 3 years. Did about 100 as an angel and a venture capitalist. I've had cases where I didn't sell my stock in time, maybe about a dozen of those, you know, where you all of a sudden you're saying, wow, I made all this money. I mean, once was a case when we made $60 million on $1 million investment, except that the tax thing wasn't right. So we went to the tax people and tried to argue with them as the stock was dropping. That's stupid. That's an F up of grand proportions, because don't worry about taxes. Pay your taxes, take the profit. I've had cases where all of a sudden you listen to smart people who give you advice, okay, who say, you know, we can do it this way. And you watch $400 million deals crumble to 50 or 10. I've seen entrepreneurs who turned down a $300 million check because they thought it was an insult. And they end up selling it to the same company for $30 million because of, you know, gavat yeter, or just too much pride. The bottom line is that my attitude towards failure, and I've had so many of them in so many different ways, is that you have to take a portfolio approach to it. You are going to fail. Bottom line, if you think you're going to build a life without failure, then you're just wrong. You're going to have failure after failure after failure. If you don't, you're not doing squat, okay? You either do stuff and you fail, or you don't do stuff. The problem or the challenge is to do enough stuff, enough yazamot, enough innovations and adventures, that even with the failures, your victories overpower them. It's like a portfolio approach. As an investor, you never invest in just one company or two companies, because they could fail. But if you take in your life and you just get out there and do it and do more and more and ship it, okay? And you think that you don't have a degree and it works out, or you just get over that fact that you just watched $60 million evaporate and you get up and you do it again, it'll work, okay? That's what we're all about. We're about this people who are back here, okay, in this incredible place, living and talking about failures when this country has been the most amazing success ever. We've come home. We are thriving. Our venture investment scene is booming. Everywhere else, it's shrinking. This country grew 35% year to year this last year. And it's because of this attitude towards failure, which is represented by this night, which is go ahead, do it, screw it up, and then try it again and win. Thank you very much. Shailot. Because I really like the hummus, as you can see, and the women. Really, I mean, speaking of failures, okay, I got here and was married, and that quickly turned into a disaster, and I got divorced. And those of you who've been through divorce know that it's not fun, and you think that's a failure. Guess what happened? Well, it can be, especially because my ex introduced me to my wife, Jane, who I've been married to for now over 30 years. So you get a failure, you think it's the end of the world, and boom, it leads you to the best. How could you not love this place? You've got to be crazy. I mean, the bottom line is this place is aggravating, it's ma'atzben, it is cool, you're in love, you're political, you hate it, you like to criticize it, but we are alive. We are alive. There's so many parts of this world that are dead. I travel all over the world. And whether I've been, in the last month, I've been in Italy and Hong Kong and Singapore and South America and Canada, they're all looking at Israel. They can't believe what we've got going here. They think that we are insane, and we are, and wonderfully so. And I just wanted to be part of it. I didn't want to watch life. I didn't want to be one of those sort of armchair Zionists, who will watch the play unfold. I wanted to be an actor, and we're all actors here. One last question. Yes? מה ההשקעה שאני הכי מצטער שלא עשיתי? Look, when I was setting up my first venture fund, Israel Seed Partners, I had been an entrepreneur, I had been an angel investor, and now I was going to be a venture capitalist. And I looked at this company that I thought had a great idea. They were going to basically put digital images on the internet. This is back in the day when we all took film cameras, and they were going to turn these images, there were no digital cameras, turn them into digital on the internet. And I thought that was a great idea. And then I learned that what you have to do as an investor is you have to do due diligence. You have to check these companies out. So I started checking this out, and I was like an investigator, and I found out that they had a loan, and they had lied about it or hadn't told me, and it was just this disaster. And I finally came back, and I was so proud of myself. I said, well, despite the fact I think this is an incredible idea and it's going to be hugely successful, I found bad diligence, so we're not making the investment. That company, which I could have invested at a $1 million valuation, was sold for $200 million 3 years later. Sometimes don't do too much diligence. Do some diligence, but go with your gut. Thank you very, very much, and enjoy your failures and make some successes.